Hello, and welcome to Team Franco Bodybuilding Podcast, episode 40. Today's title of this episode is How Do I Become a Professional Natural Bodybuilder? I've said this before, bodybuilding is just the general term that we use for all the divisions. So if you're interested in your goal to become a bikini pro, this will apply to you. So it goes for all the categories: figure, women's physique, classic, men's physique, and of course bodybuilding for men. So again, this topic is a hot topic in my opinion because a lot of beginners are always asking me this question: what needs to be done? What do I have to do? Yada yada yada. And sometimes people will search for coaches that have success with clients, but it still all comes down to what you, the individual, is willing to do and wanting to do, and also more importantly, do you have the patience to do it? So actually, I took notes this time. Hopefully I can read them, because if you ever see me write, my writing is chicken scratch. So I just made a few bullet points so I can reference. And it's almost going to be like a summary of a lot of the podcasts that I've done in the past. I've done 39 of them over the last year and a half. So before I get into the nitty gritty, take a look at what I've already offered as far as my podcast, because I think there's a little bit of something for everyone where you may be beneficial to learn about the process, the ins and outs of bodybuilding, and so on and so forth. And if you do like this podcast, please feel free to share it on any social media platform, because I appreciate, getting the word out as far as my philosophies and my thoughts. All right, so I'm going to go right into it. The first and foremost thing, and it's pretty basic, is the training. Now, people will work out, and people will also be super consistent with their workouts. But is it enough to gain enough muscle for the division that you're doing to eventually become a pro? Often it isn't. And the tough part about being an online coach is that you're not always sure how hard someone is pushing themselves, in the gym. Because you have to be willing to put your body through pain once in a while. I'm not talking about grueling workouts every single time, but you have to embrace the ability and what your body's potential is about getting stronger. Strength is one of those factors that is easily measurable. So when someone tells me they are getting stronger, that means there's a good chance they're gaining muscle. And you could be strong without gaining muscle, but for argument's sake, if you take a woman who weighs 120 pounds and they're squatting 60 pounds, and then in 6 months they're up to 120, they're gaining some muscle, because you need that muscle then to lift that heavier weight. But going to the point, you really need to embrace working out. You really need to love it for the majority of the sake. Yes, there's going to be days that you're dreading to go into the gym, or whatever, your beat or life stuff has happened. But when you're done, you should feel good about yourself. You should feel that you've accomplished something. When I first started training, I didn't even think about competing, but I love the smell of the iron in my parents' basement. Obviously, it was damp, but that smell and that feel of the weights, it was like a high to me. It gave me a buzz. And knowing that I am changing my body, as slow as it may be at times, got me excited. Now, I think it's often lost because the here and now generation thinks, all right, if I just work out a few months, I can then compete. Well, sure you can. But are you going to have that physique that you ultimately desire? Most likely not. So embracing and giving yourself the time with proper programming and, progressive overload with the weight training is what a pro needs, eventually a pro will have to do. You have to embrace getting stronger. Now, there's no magic numbers for what you should bench, deadlift, squat, or whatever it is, or, whatever It's a matter of you relatively getting stronger, your improvements, you versus you. So, first, you got to be consistent. You got to embrace the strength gains, and you really need to give yourself the time to grow. Because, again, there's a few, outliers out there that can grow really fast and they can win their pro card right away without putting much, effort in or time as someone else. But for the majority of people, you need to fall in love with weight training and what it's going to do for your body. That is something that just about all the pros that I've worked with who reach their pro status or pro clients that comes back to me every couple of years to coach them, they love working out. They love that challenge. You don't have to spend hours. It's I've always said that it's not the duration of the workout, it's what you put into it. It's the intensity. And again, it's training. You can get stronger working with submax levels with proper programming, but it still all comes down to embracing and wanting to get stronger. That's what a pro needs. There's no way around that one. So that's basically my nutshell, my little summary about how weight training in itself needs to be applied properly and allow yourself that time to grow and get bigger no matter what the division is that you're doing. So to me, that's number one. People say, well, diet. Yeah, diet is important, and I'm going to get to that next, but training is numero uno for me. You have to fall in love with the weights and what it can do for you. So diet. Now, diet is multifaceted because there's two phases, obviously. There's the maintenance growth phase, and then there's the caloric deficit phase. I'm going to lump it all together. No matter what you're doing, your diet needs to be spot on. Now, obviously, if you're in a maintenance, caloric surplus, you can be eating more and you don't have to track. You can use intuitive eating, but you still have to make sure that you are consuming enough protein, going back to the whole training thing, so you are gaining muscle. You want to make sure that you are eating enough calories for your metabolism, because sometimes people will undereat and like to be lean all year round. That's just Chase barking at something outside. Who will undereat. So you've got to find your sweet spot, as far as what's a good happy body weight for me. And I did a podcast about this, months ago, about how to find your percentage body weight after you compete and what you should hold and all that. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but obviously when you start your diet, give yourself enough time. If you are a pro and you're within pounds, 8 to 10% of your last contest weight, or if you competed before and just missed your pro card, you don't want to be too far off. But when you start your diet, whether it's 6 months, 5 months out, a good amount of time, not that typical 12-week bullshit, you need to be spot on. You need to be super consistent and willing to be more dedicated than you ever have. It obviously, this is such a Pandora's box, but you really need to be dead on with your diet, no matter how you are handling your diet, because everyone, again, is a little bit different, how they approach it, high carb, low carb, refeed days, whatever it is, free meal days, whatever it is, you need to be balls on, super accurate with your diet and allow it to develop. Because if you don't, and you do something too drastic, too soon, too fast, you may not be doing the most optimal approach, but it comes down to tracking. Obviously, that I'm a fan of tracking macros, so we'll stick with that. Whatever your macros are, you need to be close by the end of the day. You need to be patient with it in the sense of just allowing your body to learn, and if you are being coached, you listen to the changes that are made. It's not a diet that's going to, again, going back to the whole 12-week thing, I say that anyone can do anything for 12 weeks, right or wrong. But if you do something too drastic, it may not be the right approach. Therefore, if you give yourself enough time, you don't have to do anything drastic. You can be smart about it. And when you do diet strictly, even in a caloric deficit, you want to do it in a slower manner so you retain the muscle. But it all comes down to tracking and being super consistent. Yeah, all right. Okay, I guess the point that I had in my head and then I lost is that, again, when someone does something for 12 weeks, they think, all right, I'm going to diet for 12 weeks and then I can compete. Again, yes, you can, but is it going to be the most optimal way? Most likely not. Just like the training. If you just start working out, hey, I can step on stage, I'm getting serious. Well, you want to be serious all year round because you want to make sure you're feeding your body properly and not get too fat and also not be too lean to prohibit muscle growth. But just because you have the idea of you want to compete doesn't mean that you're going to get it all done in 12 weeks and do everything the right way. So tracking is super key, being consistent, figuring out what diet is best for you, and giving yourself plenty of time. There's no cheat meals. There's no coming off the diet or, oh, you know what? I screwed up, so I'm going to eat less or I'm going to do all this other things. And, I've heard it all, even with some people that I've coached. And granted, it's a dimmer switch for some, where it's sort of the same thing with me. If I decide I'm going to be in a caloric deficit, it's not a light switch. Although I've had clients who can turn it on just real quickly and they nail it. Some people need weeks to even a couple of months to get into the groove of things, and that's okay. Whatever it takes, you want to do what's best for you. But whatever it is, once you get on board, you got to stick with it and give yourself the time to nail the diet. So that's what, a pro will have to do. You got to be doing that and giving yourself the time and the patience. Stage presence is often overlooked. That's the third thing I'm going to talk about, and that's incorporating posing. I did a whole podcast about how I incorporate my posing classes and talk about that and the importance of it and everything. You see sometimes great physiques on stage, but they don't know how to pose worth a shit, no matter what the division. They put it to the end, they don't think it's as important. Posing is super, super important. Get that out of the way. Once you have the first thought about competing, even if it's a year away, start practicing. Go to a coach, go to a class, do something, because you don't want to have to wait until the end to finally figure it out, and then you fuck it up when you're on stage, and then you're like, wow, I look great, everything is on point, but my posing sucked, and I didn't win because of that. Bathing suits, posing suits, whatever you want to call them, do your research. Get that out of the way also. These are all things that pros to be do because they're prepared. Tanning, everything, exfoliating your skin, listening to the tanner, with their instructions. So all that stuff is second nature and it's super easy to do. So that's really preparation, where a pro or someone that wants to be a pro is not going to wait till the end to figure this stuff out. They're going to do it in plenty of time so they avoid that additional stress at the end. Another thing that I like to see in people when I work with, and I have seen with majority of people, and more so those who do reach pro status and then I coach, is they're simply more humble, And I think I did a podcast about this a long time ago, but people who are humble and don't make it their life, completely. And one of my old sayings is that bodybuilding is a part of your life, but it shouldn't be your entire life because there's other priorities going on. So if you do have success in bodybuilding, it's not because you inundated yourself and you put yourself in and you avoided everything else in your life. It's because you made it an important part of your life, but you also realize that there are other things going on. You have the humility, or I don't know if that's the right word, but you have the realization that I'm grateful for the status that I reached, and I'm going to spread it to others and help others, but I'm not going to be obsessive about it. I've run across people who are obsessive. They may reach their pro status. I got two at the top of my head, and then they crash and burn because they don't think they can ever put their body through that because they have to be all in. And at the same time, they weren't humble about it. They were also bragging about their status and social media and everything. And so it's something that you really need to be, and I combine it just being grateful with the opportunity of competing, is that being humble goes a long way. And people will pick up on that aura around you. That's super rare these days, but once you do see it, it's refreshing. So being humble during the process, being grateful during the process, and not making it, like so much of your life where it distracts you from other important things. And that could be your career, your family, your friends, your significant other, because you don't want to push them away. I've seen that also. You get so involved and your significant other doesn't understand. And well, maybe because you're putting too much time and too much research into it where it becomes a major distraction. Again, a lot of the top pros that I've worked with, it's just a small part of their life, because the way I look at it, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, is that you're not going to be working out that much more if you are, if your goal is to become a pro. You're going to be smart with your weight training. You're still going to eat food, obviously less when you're dieting down. But outside of that, is your life really going to be changing all that much? I mean, yeah, you get hungry, you might get on edge, but don't be an asshole about it, because it's not worth it. Because when the contest is done, these people are still going to be in your life. So changing your attitude, well, I guess I'm talking about being humble and grateful, but it's also, maybe I should just categorize it, your attitude. Your attitude and your approach is really the fourth thing. First being the training, then the diet, the presentation being the third, and then it's the attitude that you need. Another important thing, at least in my opinion, is that, to reach a pro status is the willingness to learn. So say you do everything right, and you put all the time in, you just miss winning your pro card. You learn from it. Sometimes it could be lousy judging. Sometimes it could be so close. Sometimes it could be that person was just that much better than you on that particular day. And shit happens. It's how you learn from that failure, even though it's not a complete failure, but how you learn to improve and evolve to go on to the next contest and give yourself the time and preparation to do it again. It's a learning process. You continue to learn. Over my number of years of competing, I have learned from every single show that I've competed in, even the ones that I've won. I've learned what I did right, and I've also learned how I can also improve, or what I can do to make my life a little bit easier during my prep, so I do have the better attitude. So it's a constant evolution of willingness to get better with learning. Now, if you're the type of person that wants everything here and now and will do whatever it takes to hit one show and you got to win and you don't win, I feel bad for you, because you know what? You're missing out. It takes sometimes years of proper training, proper dieting, proper attitude, learning, and all those things to reach your potential. It's just, so be it. Some have better genetics, will reach it sooner. Doesn't mean they're working harder. That's what you have to remind yourself. So it's a really a bunch of little things that you got to keep in your head and just allow yourself to grow mentally and physically. If someone comes to me, I believe anyone has the potential to become a pro. I've truly, on my souls of my children or whatever traumatic thing I can say, I believe anyone can do it. Just because if they give themselves enough time, they're willing to learn and evolve, they can reach a physique that's pro-worthy. That's the truth. Now, sometimes people will get so discouraged during their process and I can't do this, I can't do this. And maybe it isn't up to you. Maybe it isn't in you. And that's all right. At least you gave it a shot and you learned that, this isn't for you. But at the end of the day, if you have the goal of becoming a pro, you can do it with the right attitude. I've seen that over and over again where people just, they grind and they grind and they grind and it pays off at the end. Now, other things to consider, or supplemental wise, is that sometimes people will hire coaches because, they're going to get me to that pro status. There are some great coaches out there, that can get you there a little bit quicker, but, versus other coaches. But I'm going to be, totally blunt. Sometimes these coaches will throw the kitchen sink at someone And obviously, people will pull through and they win their pro card. And then there's others that they work with. The kitchen sink was thrown at them. They may not do well, and then they get a bad attitude. Well, that's because maybe you should research the coach out a little bit more to see if it's the right fit. But don't pick a coach just because you think they're going to get you to that pro status. It still comes down to all the variables that I touched upon. The training, embracing that, be willing to get strong, enjoy it, fall in love with it. The diet, figuring out what's best for you when you're not in a caloric deficit, and then giving yourself enough time to diet slowly to maintain the muscle. So all those little things, with the attitude and the stage presence, being prepared, are all necessary no matter who you hire, okay? Because when I work with someone, I give them more responsibility, because I'm not a hand holder. I'll be blunt with that. I've lost clients because of that. I give them all the information. I answer all their questions. I'm there for them 24/7. But at the same time, I want them to learn and to embrace the journey and make it their own, because everyone has their own path to travel. I cannot say that yes to whoever person hires me. You're going to get your pro card in your first show and you're going to do whatever it takes in 3 months. That's not how I roll. My last podcast, I talked about what Team Franco was all about and the typical client. I am more about gearing the plan towards, obviously, their goal, building positive habits, but also to their line of path, their journey, because everyone, again, is different, meaning that we have different careers, different family lives, different obligations, and some people may take a little bit longer than others, and that is okay. So that's why I believe anyone can reach a goal of becoming a pro and doing well at the pro level if you follow your path and not try to follow someone else's path that you may watch on social media, or some coach who brags about their clients all the time. I want to follow her path. Well, you don't know, because you don't know about their genetics, what they do, how much time they've weight trained, or any of those little details. So that's why it's important to embrace your path. And that's how I'm going to finish wrapping up this podcast. Embrace your path. That to me is what it all comes down to at the end. So those are the things that came to my head. I want to put it out there, and it's honest God truth. If you have a goal of becoming a pro, you can do it. And what I went over for the last 20 minutes are all things that I believe that you would need to be putting in place to reach that goal, to win one of your shows, to become a pro. And that's basically it. So hopefully you found this helpful. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, I'm always here, fitfranco@verizon.net. You can email me if you're interested in coaching. Email me. Check out my website, teamfrancobodybuilding.com. I'm on social media under those same names as far as Instagram and Facebook. So guys, have a great day. And if you have any other requests, please hit me up. Thanks.